we will also be giving advice to local authorities and schools that we are now advising that overseas school trips should not be going ahead. I understand that the Foreign Commonwealth Office will be issuing travel advice that aligns with that position. I want to just address briefly the issue of school closures more generally. It is not the advice right now that schools should close, or indeed that colleges or universities require to close. That is not what we are advising at this stage, although that is an issue that will be kept under very close, ongoing, regular review. Maybe it would be helpful if I just expand on that point a little bit to give some of the rationale that, of course, is informed and guided by the scientific advice that we have access to. A couple of practical issues. Obviously, closing schools has a very direct effect on the ability to keep key workers until the summer period. So this would be something that was not brief, and therefore it underlines the importance of having a position. If this position becomes necessary to advise, then we don't do that earlier than the science is advising us to do. And I hope that gives people some understanding of that position. These are, as I've said before, not easy judgments. They are difficult and complex judgments. That's why they've got to be kept under review, informed by the best science and the wider issues that we require to take account of. The last point I want to address is the issue of mass gatherings, and I should say at this stage that I'm articulating a Scottish Government position, not a UK-wide position. Other administrations, of course, will set out their own positions. As I said at First Minister's questions earlier on, we have looked carefully at the situation and come to the decision today in the Scottish Government that we will, from the start of next week, advise the cancellation of mass gatherings of over 500 people that have the potential to have an impact on our frontline emergency services. Now, I want to be clear, as I was in Parliament earlier on, that this is not a move that we are making because the science has told us that it will have a significant impact on the spread of the virus. On the contrary, the scientists tell us that it will not have a significant impact on the spread of the virus, although not a significant impact does not necessarily equate to no impact at all. But there are wider reasons that I consider and have judged that are important in reaching this decision. Firstly, there is the issue of consistency of public messaging at a time like this. If we are advising people, as we are now, that they, in the circumstances that I have already set out, should stay at home, and if, as I anticipate, over the coming weeks, we will be advising people in other ways that their normal day-to-day lives have to change, then I think it is inconsistent to have a business-as-usual message around large gatherings. But the more important point is the one I articulated in Parliament earlier on. Certain events, whether or not they need dedicated ambulance cover, we know that certain events have an impact on our policing and frontline health services, accident and emergency and ambulance services. And at a time when the pressure on those services is going to be considerable, our public services, like all areas of our economy, will have higher absence rates because of illness. Our health services in particular will be under acute pressure in the weeks and months to come. I think it is incumbent on government to do what we can to remove unnecessary burdens on our public services, and that's the rationale for the decision that I am announcing today. There will be a number of questions. I'm sure you will have a number of questions, and other organisations will have a number of questions about the specific applications of this and which events it applies to and which events it might not. We will provide detailed advice over the course of the weekend before Monday to make clear exactly the scope of this and the reasons and the rationale behind it. But we are entering a period where there will be significant changes to people's day-to-day experience. That is going to affect all of us, and the difficult judgments that are involved in that have to be taken, and our responsibility is to do that in a way that protects, as far as possible, our ability as a society to deal with the impact of what we are going to be facing. The final point I want to make before opening to questions is to remind people that a virus like this simply cannot be made to go away, much as we would like that to be the case. The responsibility we have is to seek to manage this as best we can. We are going to face, and our health service in particular is going to face, a significant challenge in the weeks and possibly months to come, which is why our wider planning around NHS capacity is so important. But our focus is very much on seeking to delay the spread, to reduce the peak impact and to protect the most vulnerable. And those are the guiding principles that will continue to inform the approach that we are taking. I know this is an anxious time for the public, and the Scottish Government, I as First Minister, the Health Secretary, the Chief Medical Officer and others will continue to do everything we can to make sure that there is clear, transparent advice and information for people, but this is not an ordinary situation, and I know the wider public understand that. So I think with those comments, I'm happy to take questions, and I'll call on the Chief Medical Officer and the Cabinet Secretary where appropriate. Jim.
The First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, there speaking about Scotland's latest response to the coronavirus outbreak. This comes shortly after the breakup of the Prime Minister's Cobra meeting. The First Minister out speaking to the Scottish public. First, she confirmed that the number of cases confirmed of COVID-19 in Scotland is 60. That's 36 up from yesterday. She says that Scotland has now moved from contain to delay, the delay phase of the government's response to this outbreak. She says as of tomorrow, the advice in Scotland to anyone with symptoms is to stay at home for 7 days. And by symptoms, she meant if you have a fever or a persistent cough. She says as yet there is no routine testing for those with symptoms. They will continue to test on a surveillance and sampling protocol. She says that overseas school trips that were planned for schools and colleges in Scotland should not go ahead. She did say that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office are going to issue wider advice about this shortly. And she importantly said that there are no school closures planned at this stage. However, that is subject to an ongoing review. She did announce earlier during her questions in Scotland that when it comes to mass gatherings from Monday, the Scottish Government is advising against mass gatherings. That's gatherings of over 500 people. So that is from Monday. She was careful to point out, though, that this wasn't based on any scientific evidence that had been given to the government. This was based on a public messaging point of view. She said that if she's going to advise the Scottish people that in the coming weeks their day-to-day lives are going to change significantly, then she doesn't feel it's in keeping with public messaging to say that you can continue to go to mass gatherings from Monday onwards. She was very careful to point out that this isn't what the scientists have advised. This is in keeping